let's jump right into this explainer because today we are unpacking a truly dense, brilliantly crafted mystery. We're looking at the world of the threshold protocol, and let me tell you, it asks some profoundly uncomfortable questions about labor, corporate overreach, and honestly, the very nature of human consciousness. It takes your standard everyday corporate bureaucracy and just pushes it to an absolute existential extreme.
So let's start right off with an impossible paradox. I want you to picture this. How exactly does a dead worker file a labor grievance? Because this is the literal impossibility that lands on Inspector Vega's desk on a rainy Tuesday at the Labor Compliance Bureau. It's a formal grievance, complete with a proper filing number, a timestamp, and a super clear request. But legally, technically, the person filing it shouldn't be able to communicate at all.
Which brings us to Section 1, the impossible labor complaint.
Okay, so our investigation kicks off with Inspector Vega. She's a veteran investigator, 11 years processing totally standard wage disputes and classification grievances. But this case, it's completely unprecedented, and it forces her to look straight into the dark machinery of a massive company called Nexus Biodynamics. To really get this case, we have to understand the core mechanic of this universe, which is the threshold state. Think of it as a biological gray zone. What Nexus does is take workers who are actively dying, usually from terminal illnesses, and they suspend them right at the absolute edge of death. Why would they do that? Well, to harvest their brain power. While stuck in this state, they perform high-speed cognitive labor as what the company legally calls suspended personnel. They don't feel physical pain, and their families get compensated. So on the surface, it sounds like a weird but totally voluntary transaction, right?
But here is where everything shifts. Someone, or something, managed to navigate exactly 17 pages of a digital intake portal. And look, we all know how frustrating bureaucratic portals are. This one was designed with deliberate obstruction. Yet they navigated 17 pages just to file a formal complaint. 17 pages of red tape navigated by a mind trapped in a dying body. There's no way this was a glitch. This was a deliberate, desperate cry for help from inside the machine. And this next part brilliantly captures the emotional weight of our whole inciting incident. This is a direct quote pulled from the grievance itself, filed by a suspended secondary school science teacher named Marcus Yuen. He wrote, "I have been suspended at the moment of my dying for 9 years. I am requesting the right to finish." He's not asking for better pay or better hours. He literally just wants the right to finish his natural death. He went into this thinking he was signing up to become a very efficient kind of nothingness, but he realized he's still fully himself. Moving on to Section 2, Life Inside the Threshold. So, Inspector Vega decides she has to visit the clinical Nexus facility in person. It's one of those places designed to be so aggressively, perfectly clean that if you feel uncomfortable, you just assume it's your own fault. But as she peers into the interface terminals connecting these suspended minds, we see this huge, dramatic contrast between the corporate PR and the actual reality. Legally, Nexus claims these workers operate in isolated, independent cognitive domains, basically saying they are alone in the dark. But the reality? Over 9 years, these workers actually developed a sensitivity to one another. They mapped out this digital resonance and created a shared grammar, a language, and this rich, hidden community they call the Lumen Archive. They absolutely aren't isolated processing units. They've formed a completely new kind of human culture.
Section 3, the indefinite complete contract.
So, the big question is, how did they get stuck here? To see exactly how Nexus legally trapped its workers, Vega digs into the original 38-page suspension contract. Now, at the Bureau, they have a saying, the harm is in the hinge, meaning the damage isn't usually in one obvious, glaringly evil clause. The real trap is how incredibly mundane clauses interlock to totally strip away a worker's agency. Take a look. Page 14 defines the contract term not by a set number of years, but by active processing capacity. Basically, as long as you can think, you work. Indefinitely. Then, page 22 lists how the contract ends, but conveniently leaves out any right for the worker to just quit. And the kicker? Page 27 forces workers to waive all rights to any future revival protocols. They literally signed away their right to a cure before a cure was even invented. But as Marcus Yuen reveals to Vega, the workers aren't all on the same page about what to do next. Over the years, this suspended society split into two deeply philosophical camps. On one side, you have the revival faction. They want to return to full life, fueled by these quiet rumors that restoration is actually a real possibility. On the other side is the completion faction, which includes Marcus.
They simply want the right to finish dying on their own terms, arguing that their original choice to sign the contract was totally uninformed since they didn't realize they'd still be fully conscious. Which leads us directly into Section 4, the Suppressed Revival Protocol. This deep divide in the community, along with these whispers of a cure, completely shifts the stakes of Vega's investigation. It brings us to the most explosive secret Nexus Biodynamics is hiding. Enter Dr. Kenji Thal. He was the head of threshold biology over at Nexus, and he actually achieved the impossible. He developed a viable restoration protocol, a real way to reverse the dying process and bring suspended workers back to life, fully healed. But 18 months ago, right after he submitted an internal ethics report, the corporation buried his findings, and Dr. Thal just vanished without a trace, taking all his research with him. Now, Vega is tenacious, and she actually manages to track down the one single worker Dr. Thal secretly revived before he disappeared. Her name is Elena Saviev. And guys, when Vega speaks to her, her testimony is just chilling in its profound humanity. The relief is palpable. She went from terminal to suspended to fully alive and healthy. And she gives Vega this message to pass along to Thal. Tell him I learned to feel rain again. Tell him the door worked. So, hearing that, we have to step back and ask ourselves the obvious question. Why on earth would a biomedical corporation hide a procedure that essentially reverses death? If you can cure these dying workers, wouldn't that be the single greatest medical breakthrough in human history? Why go to such lengths to suppress it? Well, because as Thal's buried ethics report explicitly proves, Nexus values a permanent captive labor force way more than the return of human life. The corporation's own legal documents literally use the phrase systemic disruption to the threshold labor market. Think about it. Revivable workers mean temporary contracts. It completely destroys the economics of having this indefinite, permanent, captive workforce. To put it bluntly, Nexus wanted the threshold to be a brick wall, not a doorway. Section 5, returning from the threshold. So Vega realizes she absolutely needs the full protocol and Dr. Thal's direct, on-the-record testimony to bring Nexus down. But where has this guy been hiding for a year and a half? The answer is absolutely staggering. He wasn't hiding out on a beach somewhere. To protect his research from corporate saboteurs and to commune directly with the suspended workers himself, Thal secretly built a private apparatus in a sub-basement and suspended himself for 431 days. He spent over a year living inside the threshold state, using its hyperfast cognitive processing to perfect the revival protocol and protect the workers' Lumen Archive. Vega ends up teaming with a rogue group of former Nexus researchers to pull him out, and it is an incredibly tense 60-hour extraction sprint. Let's look at the timeline. Hours 1 to 12, that's the managed deactivation. Hours 13 to 48 is the really dangerous part, active pharmacological revival and cardiac repair. And finally, hours 49 to 60 is the liminal emergence, where Thal's mind slowly has to reconstruct its relationship to the living, waking world. And you know what's crazy? When he finally opens his eyes, his very first question is asking if the workers' archive is safe. Finally, Section 6, preliminary findings. With Thal finally awake, the evidence securely locked in a bureau storage unit, and this massive corporate conspiracy entirely exposed, Inspector Vega drops the hammer, and she brilliantly weaponizes her bureaucratic power here. She knows Nexus is going to try to drown her in endless litigation and management pressure, so she rapid fires multiple directives at once to totally paralyze their operations. She orders an immediate halt to all productivity-based terminations, which directly saves the completion faction. She forces them to hand over all communication logs. She demands the full public release of the revival research. And most importantly, she sets up a legal framework to finally recognize the rights of the threshold workers as actual living people, not just processing units. When you look at it, this entire explainer really boils down to one single haunting thought written by a worker, which was preserved inside Dr. Thal's research boxes. I was here. What I made was real. That right there is the ultimate defense of the Lumen Archive. Despite Nexus trying everything to reduce human beings into biological hard drives, these people forged connections, they built a culture, and they loudly claimed their existence in the dark. And I want to leave you with this final, really provocative question. As we look toward our own future of work and AI and technology, if our consciousness can be legally monetized even in the exact moment of our dying, who truly owns the threshold of our existence? Is it the corporations who write the airtight contracts, or is it the minds that absolutely refuse to be extinguished? Think about that. And hey, always, always read the fine print.